shackled hands, downcast eyes, and hopes extinguished. This is how the United States sent African migrants home. But as they step onto Burkinabè soil, something extraordinary happens. What does Ibrahim Traore have planned for these broken souls? Could this moment rewrite their stories and redefine Burkina Faso's future? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Imagine stepping off a plane, your wrists encased in metal cuffs, your ankles bound in shackles. The sun hits your face, but the weight of humiliation is heavier than anything you've ever known. This isn't a memory from a dark chapter of history, nor is it a scene from a film. It's the reality for deported African migrants today. Forced repatriation, stripped of dignity, their humanity reduced to chains. For many African citizens sent back from countries like the United States, the journey is more than a physical one. It's laden with the burden of rejection and failure. These individuals leave home in pursuit of opportunity in a future brighter than the one they've known. But when they're returned, it's often under conditions that magnify their loss. Forced into shackles, they're not just sent home, they're sent back as symbols, walking reminders of policies that don't treat them as people, but as mistakes to be corrected. The indignity doesn't end at the shackles. For deportees, stepping onto familiar soil while bound is more than a personal experience. It's a cultural wound, echoing horrific chapters from the past. Comparisons are unavoidable. The visual of bound Africans arriving in their homeland recalls the transatlantic slave trade, not in its full historical context, but in its emotional resonance. Online, activists and citizens alike have drawn attention to this imagery, amplifying its symbolic weight. News footage shows men and women walking stiffly, restrained against their will, as if history has looped back, bringing injustice full circle. But this isn't just about the imagery, it's about what it reveals. Shackling deportees during flights doesn't just humiliate, it sets the tone for how they're perceived once they arrive. Videos shared widely on social media have triggered outrage and empathy. Comments lament the dehumanization, some asking bluntly why these measures are necessary for civilians, while others call it a scar on modern immigration systems. In the words of one Burkinabè activist, "We fought for freedom, and this is what we get. Chains again?" The harm reaches beyond what is seen. Separation from families in host countries can leave deportees fractured, emotionally and mentally. Many go abroad not just for personal gain, but to support loved ones back home. When they return empty-handed, it's not just the shackles they wear that strip them of dignity, it's the internalized belief that they've failed everyone who depended on them. This psychological toll, layered with public shame, fosters isolation and identity loss. They return to communities that may pity them at best or outright stigmatize them at worst, leaving little room for hope. The outrage sparked globally highlights a deeper issue. Immigration systems that promise fairness, but fail those with the least resources. Critics argue that the practice of forcibly shackling and deporting individuals reflects global inequality, a system where wealthier nations control borders while poorer ones bear the consequences. Deportees caught in this web face challenges well beyond their control. Without legal pathways to citizenship or sustainable opportunities at home, they are left in limbo, unwanted abroad, yet unsure of their place at home. Amid this, reactions pour in. Social media is rife with solidarity, but also anger. Comments remind viewers that deportees are not criminals, but individuals who wanted better lives. Some share their own stories of migration or lament leadership failures. One post reads, "Imagine watching your friend leave with hope in his heart, only to see him return like this, a shell of the person that left." It's easy to feel despair at the weight of these stories, but questions remain. How can someone begin anew when they've been branded as a burden? Rebuilding requires action from more than just communities. It demands leadership that challenges the systems that perpetuate cycles of inequality. Ibrahim Traore has now stepped into this turbulent moment. How he chooses to respond could take Burkina Faso and its people down a path many would call unimaginable. What happens when a person steps back onto a land they once called home, only to find it unrecognizable? For many deportees returning to Burkina Faso, the answer lies somewhere between heartbreak and survival. Having risked everything for a future abroad, they now face the daunting reality of rebuilding their lives from nothing. The moment their feet touch familiar ground, deportees are met with deep-seated challenges. For many, the dream of economic stability that once fueled their migration has been replaced with the harsh truth of financial uncertainty. Burkina Faso, like many nations on the continent, grapples with limited opportunities, and those returning often encounter the very struggles they sought to escape. Unemployment rates remain high, and those who once had aspirations to support their families from abroad now find themselves empty-handed, unsure of how to even meet their basic needs. Without savings, possessions, or clear prospects, starting over becomes an uphill battle. This lack of resources is compounded by an absence of structured support systems. The dramatized scenes in the video depict deportees wandering through crowded streets or sitting quietly in bare homes, their expressions heavy with loss. These moments are a poignant representation of how many feel abandoned, left to navigate a society that doesn't seem prepared to welcome them back. While their repatriation might be publicly framed as a homecoming, the reality is often one of solitude. Several returnees, familiar with hardship, struggle with an added layer of displacement, not quite belonging to the place they left behind, but no longer having ties to where they came from. The situation only worsens when social dynamics come into play. Deportees frequently find themselves viewed with either pity or suspicion by their communities. To some, they symbolize failure, unable to seize opportunities in wealthier nations. To others, they evoke concerns, perceived as outsiders who bring little but burdens back with them. This stigma makes reintegration difficult. Jobs, social networks, even simple human connections all feel distant in a society that often defines people by their ability to succeed. The dramatized clips show individuals returning to skeptical stares or hushed whispers, a painful reminder of the gap between expectation and reality. But these personal battles are not isolated. They reflect broader, systemic patterns tied to global inequality. Many fleeing Burkina Faso do so in response to an economic imbalance between nations. While their intent is to build a better life, the barriers they face abroad, ranging from legal restrictions to outright discrimination, force them back into economic and emotional limbo. The video emphasizes this cyclical challenge. Migrants risk their futures in pursuit of opportunity, only to face rejection as borders tighten and policies grow harsher. The historical context adds an even deeper layer to their struggles. Echoes of systemic failures stretch back decades, with waves of migration often prompted by injustices such as colonization, economic exploitation, or poor governance. These factors created structural imbalances that continue to push young people to seek alternatives elsewhere. The narratives in the dramatization paint migration not as a choice, but as the lesser of two evils, an act of desperation in response to limited options. Yet the human element remains central. Scenes of deportees reuniting with family highlight the emotional toll of their experience. While some embrace their return, grateful for survival, others display hesitation and uncertainty. A man in one clip is shown clutching a suitcase, his eyes scanning the crowd, as if searching for a place where he belongs. There's a quiet weight in these stories, where each individual carries not just their own grief, but the unfulfilled expectations of loved ones. Still, these personal struggles leave room for change. Ibrahim Traore has expressed ambitions to shift the narrative, viewing returning citizens not as burdens, but as untapped resources. The video captures hints of this vision, with speeches calling for reinvention and stories of resilience beginning to surface. For every setback a deportee faces, there is also potential in their skills, their experiences, and their endurance. A question lingers. Could their return not mark the end of something, but the beginning of transformation? With leadership willing to confront despair, hope need not remain out of reach. Can a nation's greatest resource really be found in those the world sees as discarded? That's the question Ibrahim Traore appears determined to answer as he navigates the return of deported Burkinabè citizens. For him, this is not just a moment to address the challenges of repatriation, it's a turning point for the future of Burkina Faso. When faced with images of his repatriated countrymen shackled and humiliated, Traore did not shy away from the realities of the situation. He acknowledged the systemic failures that have driven his citizens to seek better lives elsewhere. Failures rooted in years of poor leadership, corruption, and neglect. Traore pointed to a grim truth. Many of these individuals left not because they wanted to, but because staying felt like no longer an option. This honesty resonated with citizens who have long felt the weight of leadership that avoided accountability. He openly stated, "You are not here as failures. You are not a burden. You are our future. You are our resources, and you will help us build the future of Burkina Faso." These words carried power, confronting not just the stigma attached to deportees, but the broader need for a national reckoning. The symbolism of Traore meeting the deportees with open arms was more than just rhetoric. He personally welcomed them back, a gesture that signified both respect and recognition. For many, this was the first time they had been addressed not as problems, but as key players in Burkina Faso's future. By valuing these individuals, Traore began to reverse the narrative around deportation, from one of shame to one of potential. His message was clear. The experiences and skills these returnees gained abroad, even under difficult circumstances, could be transformed into tools for national rebuilding. Traore's vision didn't stop with words. His strategy to reintegrate deportees involved tangible commitments. He announced initiatives centered on creating new jobs, developing infrastructure, and improving access to education and healthcare. These plans aren't abstract promises. They represent structural changes designed to position the returnees as contributors to the country's development. For instance, discussions about infrastructure projects include plans to utilize the technical knowledge that some returnees acquired abroad. Efforts to expand local industries aim to draw upon their insights into modern systems, fostering collaboration rather than dependency. Already, there are signs that this approach is bearing fruit. Returnees have started working on local projects, volunteering to modernize industries and help build necessary facilities. These contributions are helping to rebuild more than just physical structures. They're strengthening social cohesion. Their involvement shows how skills honed abroad can be adapted to local needs, creating a sense of ownership and pride among the returnees. One project involving water management has particularly stood out, with repatriated workers employing techniques learned abroad to improve access to clean water in rural communities. These small but meaningful changes speak to the larger possibilities Traore envisions. The returnees' integration efforts haven't just impacted practical matters, they've influenced attitudes. The emphasis on inclusion and progress is reshaping how communities perceive deportees. Instead of symbols of failure, they are becoming examples of resilience. For Traore, this shift is essential. It sends a message to the rest of the nation. Burkina Faso's strength lies in its people, including those once viewed as lost. Traore's larger plan also positions Burkina Faso as an example for other nations facing similar crises. As he works to integrate returnees into his country's growth, he raises an important question. What if this approach could inspire leadership across Africa? The continent has long grappled with the challenges of migration and displacement, but Traore's model suggests a way forward, one rooted in valuing human potential rather than treating people as liabilities. Could this framework be adapted elsewhere? In doing so, could deportation itself be reframed as an opportunity for collective progress? Ultimately, Traore's vision seeks to create a stronger, more self-reliant Burkina Faso. His policies aim for sustainable development, but his approach also signals a broader cultural shift. By embracing his people, regardless of how the world may view them, Traore's leadership positions unity, resilience, and potential as the pillars of his nation's future. And that future, it's one in which Burkina Faso rises, carried forward by the very citizens the world let go. This is more than just a story of deportees returning home. It's a story of hope, transformation, and rewriting a nation's narrative. Under Ibrahim Traore's leadership, These individuals are no longer seen as symbols of failure, but as agents of change with untapped potential. What if every nation adopted this perspective, viewing displaced people not as burdens, but as vital contributors to progress? Traore's bold vision challenges us to rethink how we value human resilience. Could Burkina Faso's approach inspire a global shift? As the pieces come together, one question lingers. Can this model spark true change? Starting here,